Good morning. My name is Chris Wright. I am a judge in Lake County. As they say, misery loves company, so I have 3 kids. One of them is a sophomore in high school, one of them is an 8th grader, and we've left, and I still have a little one, a 4th grader. A couple of years ago, more than that, about 3 years ago, there was an incident in Deerfield where parents had hosted a party with their children being present. And as a result of things that went on at that party, 3 young men lost their lives. I've been a judge for 6 years. I was an assistant state's attorney in Lake County for roughly 12 years. So I was a prosecutor the majority of my career. I also did criminal defense work and civil work as well. And about 2 whole years into my career as a judge, the chief judge calls me and tells me that I've been assigned this case from Deerfield, which was at the time a misdemeanor. Little did I know that that case would become sort of the poster child, if you will, for social hosting and parental responsibility, not just in Lake County, not just in Illinois, but literally across the country and into other countries as well, and I'll talk about that more later. Not much shocks me, I have to say, after 20 years in a criminal courtroom. I currently preside over a felony courtroom in Lake County. I'm also a presiding judge of a therapeutic intensive monitoring drug court, which deals with career criminals that are career criminals as a result of their alcohol or drug addiction. I like to say I think I've seen just about everything that there is to see in a criminal courtroom. This case shocked me, and one particular part of this case shocked me, and I'll talk about that more at the end. Since apparently they've canceled all my children, that's your soap opera teaser. When this case happened in Illinois, it was a violation of what was called the Illinois Liquor Control Act. At the time that this happened, it was a misdemeanor for a parent to, or a host, to give alcohol to a child. That has changed literally as a result of this case. And it was legislation sponsored by our local state senator, Susan Garrett, actually sponsored the legislation that changed the law. It changed really at this part right here at the bottom. And what that part says is this, that if you're a parent or a social host and people drink in your house and you allow that to go on, and as a result of that, indirectly results in great bodily harm or death to any person, the person violating this subsection shall be guilty of a Class 4 felony. In Illinois, a Class 4 felony is punishable by 1 to 3 years. In the Illinois Department of Corrections, 3 to 6 years if you're eligible for an extended sentence, followed by a year of mandatory supervised release or parole. You could also be fined up to $25,000. You could be placed on probation or intensive probation for up to 30 months and spend up to 18 months of local incarceration in a periodic imprisonment or work release facility in Waukegan. When the case was tried, this was a Class A misdemeanor. It's a jailable offense, but excuse me, in the local county jail, not in the Department of Corrections. Excuse me. The reality is this. Because of the HUTSELL case, law enforcement has become enormously aggressive, and rightfully so, to ferret out this kind of permissive behavior. It's extended also, really, these 2 sections, and this will be the only law school that you go to today. Really, the part that I wanted to talk about is this part down here, because we see a lot of this. We frankly see a lot of this important. We frankly see a lot of it this time of year at prom time. A person who rents a hotel or a motel room for kids or minors to use for the consumption of alcohol, you fall under the purview of this section. And again, that consumption of alcohol results in great bodily harm. committed a felony. All right, who were Sarah and Jeff HUTSELL? That was the name of the defendants. It's colloquially known as the Deerfield parents case. The Deerfield parents actually had names, and they were Jeff and Sarah HUTSELL. And they were extraordinarily highly educated. Mr. HUTSELL had an MBA from Harvard. He was a CFO for a major figurine company. He had a buyout from that company, opened his own furniture making business, and was doing enormously well. They were hugely active in the Deerfield community. They were active in any number of charitable organizations. They were active in their church, the parish that they were a member of. And they were really what I like to describe as our neighbors. I grew up in Lake Forest. I live in Lake Bluff. I pointed out to the kids, which freaks me out a little bit. I graduated from the school 33 years ago. So it's people that we know. We know the HUTSELLs. They live next door to us. They go to church with us. They might be on the Borton board with us. They might be on the Women's Auxiliary at the hospital with us. We know them. They are all around us. What happened is this. Their son came home from his freshman year at University of Kansas for the Deerfield High School homecoming. The HUTSELLs lived in a home right near the high school, sort of down this long private drive. Beautiful home. It's a big, beautiful home. It was, as many homes are in these communities, a reflection of everything that Mr. HUTSELL had been able to accomplish in his life. Their son brought friends over, and it's like every other teenage encounter. That group of friends started growing, and it became larger and larger and larger. The HUTSELLs had a unique entrance into the basement of their home. You could go into their 4-car garage. There was a stairwell that led directly into the basement. A number of kids were there. The testimony at the trial was such that Mr. HUTSELL clearly was in the basement a number of different times when there was sort of open, notorious drinking going on. In the basement, there were beer pong games. Now, I had no idea that there was a game called beer pong. I really am fun, but I'm not that fun. They bounced ping pong balls into beer cups. That's beer pong. Going on all over. Mr. HUTSELL's talking to this young man who's holding a red Solo cup full of beer about internet gambling. He's down in that basement 3 or 4 times. At the end of the day, a couple of the boys decided just drinking the beer wasn't enough. They wanted to get high. So they went up to this boy's car. 5 boys in total went to this little Volkswagen. I think it was a Jetta. And they sit in the car. One of the boys that was there in the car had just arrived at the party. He had a twin brother, a terrific athlete, very popular kid, a very accomplished kid at Deerfield High School. He sat behind the driver of the car. They decided to get high, and they did. And they decided to go zooming down this private drive that leads to the HUTSELL's home. The driver loses control of the car. He hits a tree at the driveway. The car sort of nosedives down into the ground. Physics takes over. The car leans into the tree. The roof of the Jetta hits the tree and is sort of peeled back like a sardine can. The car kind of spins and comes to rest, literally, at the base of the parking area to the HUTSELL's driveway. The boy sitting behind the driver, the one that had just gotten to the party, the one who decided to go for a car ride, is killed instantly. The driver's killed as well. This is the tree, this is the door that was ripped off the vehicle. That's the roof in the driver's side. And you'll see in this area sort of that tarp that's there for a reason. And that's the back seat. What that's covering is the young man that was sitting in the back of the car. That's another view of the extent of the damage to the car. Well, needless to say, 911 calls are made, Deerfield responds, paramedics respond, and they start an investigation. They go into the garage and they begin to find in the garbage cans a number of, beer cans and pop cans as well. Well, why is that important? Why does that matter? Well, why that's important is because the parents and the kids, post-accident, pre-police, start to clean up. And there was testimony at the trial that the kids and one of the parents was cleaning up. Bad idea. Nothing will get the ire of the police department up like you trying to hide what you were involved in. More of the same. They're the red solo cups that all the kids were drinking out of. Well, they start an investigation and they figure out what happened, and these parents who are highly successful, pillars of their community, active in just about every aspect of local life, end up having their mugshots taken at the Lake County Sheriff's Department. Here's your Harvard MBA dad now charged with a criminal offense. There's the mom that spent time in New Orleans after Katrina with youth groups with her church, who took kids to Mexico to engage in mission work with her church. I said the HUTSELLs are your neighbors, and I firmly believe that. I also would submit to you that the HUTSELLs were not bad people. I think they made unbelievably bad decisions, but I don't think they were bad people by a long shot. So we go to trial. And what did that look like? Well, let me describe how that looked to me, because I sit in kind of a unique position where I get to walk out and look at everybody in the courtroom like I'm looking at you this morning. The entire Chicago press corps was there. I mean, all the talking heads that you see on the nightly news were sitting in that courtroom. All the print journalists were there. The courtroom was filled with people supporting the HUTSELLs. The courtroom were there, frankly, with residents from Deerfield who were so horrified and disgusted that they wanted to watch what happened to these parents. The state actually called as a witness in that case the son who had the friends come over to testify against his parents. They had the right to do that, and they did it. So there's a Greek tragedy playing out in front of me, literally, as I'm watching the son testify against his mother and his father. Friends were called that were at that party to testify against the son, because they were impeaching the son with the testimony of the friends, because the son didn't testify consistently with what he had told the police. So now we have friends pitted against friends. You have friends versus Mr. and Mrs. HUTSELL, kids that had grown up in that house, kids that had known the HUTSELLs their whole life, now being trotted in to testify against them. One of the more surreal things for me was having to talk to all these kids because the state gave them testimonial immunity. And what that means is this: anything that they admitted that they did that was illegal, drinking beer or smoking pot, the state agreed in exchange for their testimony they weren't going to turn around and charge them for engaging in that criminal behavior. So all these kids that the state trotted in to testify all had to go out and hire lawyers. They all brought their lawyers into my chambers, and I had to sit there and go over their immunity agreements with them. Here are literally anywhere from 16 to 20-year-old kids that are being put in this position, not because the state was being unreasonable, but this is what happened. The sentencing rolled up, and again, I walk out, and it was packed, and it was one of those situations where, as a trial judge, you're sort of darned if you do and darned if you don't. I understood, I think, what happened that night. I had a fairly clear picture of what had gone on. It was a misdemeanor. It wasn't a felony. All they could have been sentenced to was a year in jail. You're talking about people that not only didn't have any criminal history, but had lived really model lives in the community. I had to listen
and you'll hear more from Linda perhaps later about what it's like to read a victim impact statement. I had to listen to the parents and the families of the boys who lost their lives come into court and look to me as if there was something I could do that could change anything that happened. I wish there was. I wish sincerely I had that power, but certainly I didn't. Mr. HUTSELL went to jail. Mrs. HUTSELL was given a jail sentence, but it was stayed because the evidence didn't support her being in that house. As a friend of mine that's a judge with me, who's a wife and a mother, pointed out to me what probably happened, this is after the trial was all over, is that she said, you go down there and you figure out what's going on and you come back up here and you tell me. Well, that is probably what happened. But in doing that, she probably exposed herself to liability, certainly criminal liability. That's not it. It's not over for the HUTSELLs. It literally isn't over for the HUTSELLs because about a month ago, the appellate court reversed the trial court's decision dismissing part of the civil case against them, and they reinstated that civil case. They're still on trial for this, but they're on trial for this now civilly. You don't have to be charged in Illinois with a criminal offense to expose yourself to civil liability. The law is such, and largely because of this case, that even if you're not charged, if you knowingly violate the law in your home, almost every single insurance policy back then, and certainly every single insurance policy now, has an exclusion for your criminal conduct that does not extend coverage to you. You are on the hook personally for whatever damage is awarded by a judge or a jury. So what happened to the HUTSELLs? They left, and you can hardly blame them. Their reputations were destroyed. Their standing in the community was destroyed. They have become the bad parenting example, not just in Lake County, not just in Illinois, but in the community and the international community. And here's what I mean by that. I'm in Einstein's after the trial's over. I bump into a friend of mine, and he says, I read about your case. I'm like, oh, great. And he said, yeah, but you know where I read about it? And I said, no, where? And he said, I read about it in Scotland. I said, what were you reading, the International Herald Tribune? I figured they picked up an AP Wire story. No. A Scottish journalist was writing a story about a similar incident that happened in Scotland. So we're not alone. We're not alone in Illinois. Literally, this thing got press coverage all over the world. And I'm not saying that about me. I'm saying that about what these folks went through, what they had to go through. At the end of the day, I don't think the criminal case, I don't think the civil case is even the worst of what the HUTSELLs had to go through. They have got to wake up every morning with the knowledge that this happened on their watch. They've got to wake up every morning knowing and asking themselves this question, why? Why didn't I go in that basement? Why didn't I take all the keys away from those kids? Why didn't I stop my son from bringing these kids over before it even happened? Imagine what that's got to feel like. I mean, you can move, you can restart your life, you can restart your career, you can find a new church. At the end of the day, you are never going to change what happened, and the HUTSELLs were never going to change what happened at the end of their driveway that night. I said not much shocks me. In that case, something shocked me to my core. As I indicated, there was a number of kids that testified. Some of the kids that testified were the kids that survived that car accident. Those kids testified on a Thursday. We finished the trial, the proofs on a Friday, and then Saturday morning we did closing arguments, and we put the jury out. Saturday morning, the prosecutors walk in, and their mouths are hanging open. And they say, can we talk to you? And I said, sure. And they said, we just want to let you know that the boys that testified that were in that car were arrested last night for minor in possession and consumption of alcohol. So how do you do that? I remember just thinking to myself, you've got to be kidding me. How is that possible? Well, that's possible, and it's not, frankly, unusual. And you'll hear more from Lori, and you'll hear, I think, from Linda as well. Kids, they're fascinating creatures. And there's no more resourceful teenager in the world than the teenager that wants to find beer or alcohol or marijuana. They will do anything to find it. And when they drink and when they get high, they are affecting the very center of their brain that deals with judgment and reason. Was it any wonder that the horror that those kids went through, the fact that they had to testify and relive that, might actually drive them to want to engage in that behavior again? I don't think it's really a shock. I mean, I think that's what you deal with when you're dealing with teenagers. That's the creature and that's the challenge to these communities in general and to us as parents that we have to deal with. It's that beer, it's that joint that makes them think they're invincible. And I think the challenge for us as parents and the challenge for us as a community is to help them realize that by making that one choice, you can start a series of events that you lose control of in a heartbeat. Thank you very much for being here. The fact that you're here means that you all want to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. I applaud you for that, not just as somebody who lives in this community, but somebody who has to deal with this tragedy almost on a weekly basis. It's my hope that I never see you again. But if I do bump into you, that I see you hopefully enjoying one of the many wonderful things that our kids will have opportunities to explore at the high school. And I look forward to taking any questions that you have later. Thanks very much.
Hi, I'm Dory Patsis. I'm an ER nurse at Lake Forest. Volunteer fireman for Lake Bluff. Got a bunch of kids, ages down 25 down to 15. So I've been through a lot of these kids. This is Eric. He's fireman over at Millwood, Chief, and he's a firefighter for Lake Forest. He and I work together quite a bit with our jobs. Teen drinking is a problem. It was interesting, the questions we got at the very end from the kids. They were more concerned about what trouble they were going to get in versus the actual drinking. You know, we try and talk to them about how they're influenced their peers. We're finding, studies are showing that kids think everybody's drinking, so it's okay. And sadly, they see us drinking. And that's, and sometimes our behavior is completely opposite of what we tell kids. You know, don't go drink and drive. When we go out to dinner, we have a couple glasses of wine. What do? We get in the car with our kids. So we're already sending them a bad message. So they're going to be influenced by their peers. And there's a lot of drinking going on that I hear of starting in 8th grade from my daughter, who's now a freshman at the high school. All the kids are doing this. Mom, they're all going to go do this. You know, what do you think about that? So they're talking to more themselves than they are to us. And what we try and tell them growing up sort of levels off for a bit with them. They also think that if their friends are drinking, then they think more of their friends are drinking, then again, that behavior is acceptable. And an average 6th grader, from the studies that we've shown, or read, I think about 50% of their friends have had alcohol. And actually, it's about 20%. That's still a shocking number to me. 20% of our 6th graders have tried alcohol. 1/5 of our 8th graders, and these are national statistics, have been drunk. Little guys. We look at these kids. When they come in the ER and you see this little kid just green and puking and can't understand how he got this way, and realize that they're 13 years old. They didn't have the reasoning at that point to say no, and they certainly are not going to feel better when they sober up. Keep them there for a while. So these kids are overestimating, and they're getting permission because they think everybody else is doing it. So we're finding that these kids are more likely to engage in drinking because they think everybody else is doing it, and they want to belong. We're also finding that when kids drink, it's kind of like when in the very, very old days, you know, you could have a couple glasses of wine. Women smoked when they were pregnant. Now we know not such a good thing. One small drink can cause fetal alcohol syndrome. Studies are showing that kids that drink early are really damaging the synapses in their brain. 10% They're going to remember less, 10% less than they would. If you look at the next one, we can show actually a CT scan. Now, I like things that are visual. You can tell me I'm losing some of my brain, but here's actual evidence. The one on the left, non-drinker. The one on the right, not so perfused, doesn't have so much blood flow up there. Definitely damaging their brain. And that sticks. And that's one of the other, well, does it come back? That's one of the questions we had at the end. Am I going to be better when I stop drinking? No. No, no, no. That's permanent. They also show that binge drinking is a big thing with the kids. You know, they are scouring. I learned from my older kids, I can't have any alcohol in the house because whatever I had was replaced with something else, usually water. So everything I had in the house had to go away. And we didn't even lock it up because there were ways to get in things that I didn't even know about. So all the alcohol went down. All the drinking and having a glass of wine in front of my kids at night had to stop because they saw this behavior and they were going into my liquor cabinet. But these kids binge drink, so they get the bottle, right? They're all happy. Now they're going to go make mixed drinks. And they drink it quickly because they think they'll get into less trouble. Well, what does that do? They ingest it. The alcohol rises really quick, and then they get alcohol poisoning, or they get really, really sick. And a number of kids from this community have thrown up on me. So this binge drinking behavior is epidemic to this age range. It makes them feel good. They don't realize how sick they're going to get. They don't realize that when they start drinking or when they get unconscious, and if they don't call 911 and Eric doesn't get there to help them, they don't realize that they could die. And the kids scatter. We know that. No one's going to want to get in trouble. We see a lot of car crashes. We see drownings, falls, burns. People, once they get beer goggles, the incidents start rolling, especially when there's parties and multiple kids involved. People have guns in their homes. You know, they're avid hunters. Kids do stupid things. Now they're going to sneak, or they already got the alcohol. Now they're going to sneak and show some of the firearms that are in our house. We have had shootings. But alcohol poisoning, I think, is the worst that we see with the kids chronically just drinking way too much, way too quick, and then getting themselves way too sick. An instance, one of my friend's kids, one of my son's friends, at the house, I was at work, left the house, snowbank. Snowbanks and alcohol in winter don't mix. Just happened to find this kid early enough. I'm one of the moms that no matter what you do, if you call me, I'll come pick you up. No questions asked until later. And they called me and said this kid's in the snowbank. 911's called, kids brought in. Hypothermic, throwing up. The parent was more mad that we had brought him to the ER. Right. Very sick and close to not going to make it. That was their point, that who's going to know about this and will it hurt them on their college? And we laugh, but that's not unusual. That's what we hear a lot of. Is anyone else going to know about this? Is this going to be in the blotter? Nobody wants to be in the blotter, but my concern is I'd rather have you live, and we'll worry about that stuff later. Thanks. So it's impaired judgment also. That's what we're finding. The kids just aren't reasoning. They're good kids. This kid that was in the snowbanks is a good kid. She just really made a stupid decision. What I try and tell some of the kids in the ER, if your parent's not next to you, pretend they were. If what you're going to do, they're going to not want you to do, let that uncomfortable feeling pass, because it is uncomfortable. Everybody's drinking. Everybody's doing this behavior, and they want to join in because, you know, they want to belong. Let that uncomfortable feeling pass, and then remove yourself. And if they can get past that bad feeling, then they've made pretty good strides.
As Lori was talking about, again, the big thing is alcohol poisoning is what affects that we get to see, or unfortunately that I get to see on the ambulance. Fortunately, it is not that large a number for the young population, the very adolescent young population like Forrest. We do have situations that we do respond to. Here's where kids are intoxicated to the point where their breathing becomes disrupted or not at all, and their gag reflex, and that's what we explained to the kids earlier. That's the biggest thing. Their bodies aren't large enough as our bodies are as adults to process the alcohol, And because they're drinking so quickly, because they want to get the saying of the get in and get out. You know, the parents are around, I'll drink real quick, and then they'll come home and try and pretend nothing happened is the issue, because they're drinking all that alcohol in such a short period of time. They're overloading their body, and they're creating a situation where they don't have the gag reflex, the ability to actually forcibly expel products or liquids or stuff like that through throwing up becomes decreased, and a situation where they aspirate, or basically that fluid or that alcohol comes back down in their lungs, can create a situation, obviously it's not good for breathing, but also long-term infection, so on and so forth. So that's, I think, what they need to understand more so, and that's what the parents need to instill in them, is that those are the big dangers for them. They saw these examples. Obviously, none of these examples are anything that are anything good for you, or anything that's appealing, if you will, as the result of drinking too much alcohol. These were numbers that Lori established. We got through just according to Kids Health. If you know someone who's been drinking, try and get them help, or try to observe that as quickly as possible. And again, that's typically, you're rarely going to see kids or adolescents that are just going to go and have 1 or 2 beers, such as we do, or as adults who go out, as Lori gave the example, go out to dinner, have a glass of wine, and go home. They are actually going to go out and binge drink, and that's the warning signs that need to be addressed quickly. These were the examples of the results that we gave to them. Myself, I've been a firefighter paramedic for 18 years. I worked in the city of Lake Forest. This will be my 9th year working in Lake Forest. I worked 4 years in North Chicago before this, so I got to see a lot of examples of stuff with kids. I delivered children from children in the field and saw a lot of instances of teenage drinking. I have been told many times I have run in burning buildings to save people. That's not to get autographs when this session is over, though I will. But more so, it's a respect level. People tell me that they respect my position, what I do, and I respect all of you for making time out of your day to be here today to educate yourself on the dangers of teenage drinking, and also the situation where you're trying to educate yourself on what to do. I think today I'm not a parent, but I think as a parent, the difficult challenge you guys have is how do you educate your children on something that you can't actually physically give to them? I need that time.
Hello? Great. How do you do that? That to me is a tremendous challenge on you. And again, it's not something you can't sit them down at the kitchen table and line up a shot of vodka and a beer and a glass of wine and say drink it all and see what the effects are in front of them, as you can with a math lesson or a science lesson. So that's a difficult challenge for a parent today and any day. I will tell you that some way, and the best way that you figure out is basically talking. Obviously, as parents, you all have to have the discussion with your kids about sex. That's, I think, even an easier conversation today in this day and age than it is to have a conversation about drinking alcohol, because, you know, you turn on the television set, it's filled with sex and everything else. So kids are already learning that at a younger age anyway. But to sit down and discuss the effects of alcohol, they can hear people like me or Lori or Judge Stride step up here and talk about this stuff, but to actually see what the results are. And I'll give you the example of where we get to see it here. As a senior fireman in Lake Forest, I pick my vacation in August, September. The junior guys, they want the 4th of July and they want Christmas. That's great. Well, that's because they don't know the organization in Lake Forest that takes place every year, which is a disaster for us. August and September is the start of Lake Forest College. And guess what happens? All these kids that maybe didn't have a discussion, maybe they were drinking before they came to Lake Forest College, but majority of the people that we have to deal with in the ambulance are their parents said no, they didn't want to talk about it, they didn't educate their kids, and guess what? Day one, they want to accomplish the adolescent years of drinking in one night at one toga party at lovely Lake Forest College. And guess what we get to do? While I'm sitting at home laughing because I took vacation, the junior guys are up because they're running 5, 6, 10 ambulance calls at Lake Forest College, taking all these students. And when I first started there, we literally will take busloads of ambulances of kids to the hospital. We have had ambulance situations where we've had mutual aid ambulances from other towns transporting 10, 12 kids in one night after one party, because these kids come there, they, again, want to accomplish all the experiences of drinking in one night. They're away from their parents. There's nobody there to guide them, if you will. Fortunately, the police department in this town is very aware of the situation. They make sure their officers patrol the campus on a regular basis just to find these kids, because oftentimes they drink, they want to go home because they're embarrassed, they may be throwing up or getting sick at the party, if they're fortunate to do that. Then what happens is they go back to the dorm room. The security and the campus staff are vigilant to make sure that they're checking on kids on a regular basis. And they find them in the showers and passed out in the courtyards and wherever. And then, of course, we have to take them to Lori at the hospital. So those are the things that you guys will encounter now. Your children are 7th and 8th graders here at the junior high. They're going to go to the high school, which they're going to be introduced to a little bit more freedom, if you will. And it's not saying lock your kids up in a closet and don't let them go out, because that's not realistic. But just be mindful that these conversations, just as important as the conversation is about driving or sex or where else, it's also important to have the conversation about the drinking part. And then when they go on into college, especially. So again, my hat's off to all of you in here that are taking the time. In theory, this room should be filled with people, because I guarantee you, nobody wants to have that conversation. Everybody will have the sex conversation. Nobody wants to have the drug and alcohol conversation or feel it's easy. And I don't think there's as much information about that than there is here. So I give you guys the best of luck and respect all of you for being here.
And one other thing, that if somehow, unfortunately, your child does end up with us at the ER or sick, we understand how horrifying it is. Most of us there are all parents. If I could just ask that you take the instance seriously and talk with them. They are all concerned about what trouble they're going to get in, and they should, because what unfortunately we do see is once they start drinking, we have kids that we see chronically. As a 6th grader, I've seen a kid. As a 13-year-old, I actually still see this child. And it's not just one, there's many. So if you can stop it at the beginning, and it's uncomfortable to be in front of other parents with a child that's done something that's not right and you're not proud of. But it's better to stop it at that point so that they don't continue to be lifelong drinkers.
Good morning. I want to thank Ms. Levin for inviting me to speak. My name is Linda Haig. I've lived in Lake Forest and Lake Bluff for over 30 years. I'm here to tell you a story about my son, Mark, who made a decision one night that killed him. Most of you today will not die or have a child that dies as a result of a car crash involving alcohol. But please know that the death of a loved one is not the only consequence of underage drinking. I came here today to share my son Mark's story. He made a decision one night that killed him. I know that he would want me to tell you the story, and I pray that this information will prevent you from making that same fatal mistake. And excuse me, I'm addressing this as though I'm speaking to a group of children. I don't often speak to adults, so forgive me for that. I'll try to change my verbiage as I go along. My Mark did not die from cancer or kidney disease or some other illness that he could not control. He died because he was drinking and driving with friends. His death was preventable. Mark was just like one of the kids that I spoke to earlier and that were sitting in front of me. And you're just like one of your kids who are young, beautiful, full of life, and promise for the future. As your children, my son walked these aisles and sat in these seats several years ago. He was once a student at Lake Forest High School. He was officer of his freshman class. He played freshman football and baseball. He was an officer of Croya. He studied algebra, biology, advanced Spanish. He was a popular kid. At the end of his freshman year, he moved to Florida to be with his father. These were tough decisions as Mark's father and I were divorced. He spent his sophomore year at Venice High School. He came home frequently to Lake Forest and spent summers and vacations with us. He agonized whether to go back to Florida or stay here in Illinois with his 2 sisters and brother. I wish that he would have chosen otherwise. Mark died on November 24th, 1996 at 3:05 a.m., almost 15 years ago. He was in a Mustang convertible with 2 other boys. They had all been drinking. My son was trapped in a car that flipped over and landed upside down. He suffocated to death. The 2 other boys were thrown from the car and walked away unharmed. Who was Mark? He was a poet, a certified scuba diver, a golfer, a weightlifter, a joke teller, a busboy, an aspiring chef, a reader, and a thinker. He was my son. He was a brother to Joshua, Jessica, and Bridget, a beloved stepson to my husband, Rich, and a nephew to many, a cousin to 22. He became friends with two young men at Venice High School. He went to one of the boys' houses on that Saturday night. According to Mark's friends, Wade's house was the party house. Unfortunately, in most communities, our community is no exception, there are parents who allow their underage children to drink and entertain other children. Wade's father was a doctor, and Wade's mother was a nurse. And both were home that night while the boys were playing pool, swimming on the beach, and drinking beer. Mark's curfew was midnight. He went home, kissed his father goodnight, and then snuck out and drove north to Sarasota with his two friends, where they attended a battle of the bands. They left Sarasota about 1:30 a.m. A young couple were driving behind the Mustang as they all drove south on Highway 41. As they approached Osprey, the witnesses say that Wade was driving erratically and too fast. Wade lost control of the car. It hit an embankment. The car flipped and landed upside down. Wade and Jonathan were thrown from the car. The young couple saw what happened and stopped to help. The man tried to get my son Mark out of the car, but he couldn't open the door. He smelled gas, took off his shirt, and stuffed it into the tank, where the gas cap was missing. His fiancée went for help. The paramedics came and spent 3 hours extricating my son from the Mustang and then formally identified him. I was notified at 6:30 a.m. that my son was dead. No more horrible or gut-wrenching phone call can be taken by a mother. Our lives will never be the same. Wade and Jonathan walked away and went home to their parents that morning. They pointed their fingers at one another as to who was driving the Mustang. One of them lied to try to save his own skin. After months of investigation, fiber and blood samples, newspaper articles, and public discussion, Wade was indicted for DUI manslaughter and vehicular homicide. A week-long trial took place. I have some of the articles from the trial on that bulletin board. He was convicted and spent 10 years in jail. He lost his appeal. If you think that this can happen to your child, you're wrong. It happens because some children think it's okay to drink and drive. I was looking at the beautiful faces of your children this morning and know that they have tough decisions to make. Although they're not adults, they have to make adult decisions. And some of the decisions that they make affect everyone around them. I wanted to let them know today that what they do has a ripple effect. But I think that you as parents have to help them make these decisions. Try not to be their friend. Try to be their parent. I posed a question to your children this morning. I asked them if they wanted to die like my son. I can answer for him. I know that he did not. He did not want to be remembered for having his photo plastered on the front page of newspaper articles for weeks. That wasn't his planned legacy. But I know he felt peer pressure, although he still thought he was invincible. He was the new kid on the block, and he wanted to be one of the boys. I'm sure that some of you here today have felt that while you were growing up. I know that I have. I'm 59 years old, and I still want to be accepted and loved by my friends. But we must let our children know that alcohol is not the route to take to accomplish that. My son's blood alcohol content was below the legal limit. His two friends were above. Even having one beer can put your child's life in jeopardy. I want to demystify some media and popularly propagated so-called facts about drinking alcohol. It doesn't make your child more sexy or attractive. It does encourage unprotected and unwanted sexual activity. It does make them less inhibited. It makes them think they're smarter, cuter, and stronger than they really are. It does slow their reactions even after one beer. It makes them slur their words and say stupid things. Alcohol consumption increases the occurrence of date rape. It's a depressant, not a stimulant. Alcohol affects the teenage brain differently than grown adults. The teen brain goes through rapid development and wiring changes between the ages of 12 and 21. Teen alcohol use will damage this wiring, which is essential to become a mature, thoughtful, and responsible adult. A young person who begins drinking at the age of 13 has a 45% probability of becoming addicted to alcohol versus 7% for someone waiting until they're 21. Drinking reduces the size and performance of the part of the brain that handles memory and learning by as much as 10%. The fact is that alcohol makes children lose their ability to think clearly and make sound decisions. It robs them of one of their most valuable assets, their ability to think. Binge drinking kills more young people in this country than cocaine, heroin, meth, and every other illegal drug combined. Alcohol abuse is the largest drug problem that this country faces. I've heard lots of excuses from kids who drink, especially from my older children's friends. Some of the excuses that I've heard is, I can handle my liquor. I'm not driving. I don't drink to get drunk. I only drink on weekends. It's just beer. The fact is that alcohol is alcohol, and it all negatively affects the performance of your major organs. And all the above are just excuses that can kill you. I want to pose another question to you as parents. Why do we all have to drink to have fun? We need to remember that alcohol is a drug and it should be used accordingly. Our society uses alcohol to relax, celebrate, and socialize. One of the problems is that we abuse it. Teens often drink to get drunk. Drinking becomes the goal, the event in itself. I think we're all smarter than that. We as parents have responsibilities, and I think one of them is to find alternatives for our children, to think that in order to socialize, they have to drink. We sometimes encourage drinking as adults and irresponsible behavior. We host pre- and post-prom parties where we allow alcohol to be served. We hire bouncers to monitor our teens while they are drinking at our homes. We think we're smart by taking the car keys away by giving us and our children a false sense of security while allowing underage drinking. We underestimate our children's abilities to sneak in and out of houses. By participating in the above, we are giving tacit approval to our teens to drink more and in other venues. We're afraid to say no. The law in Illinois states that it is illegal to drink if you are under the age of 21. We must convince our children that this is an adult privilege. The legal penalties for supporting this behavior are serious. We have gone forward with our lives. We've established a scholarship fund at Lake Forest High School. We've raised over $160,000. We sometimes sit on the bench outside of Croya headquarters in Lake Forest that has Mark's name on a plaque. There's a golf award that's given each year at a local club in Mark's name. It's not given to the best golfer, just the one who works the hardest to get better. Mark wrote many poems, and one was written on his bedroom wall. And it goes like this: when death does me part, I shall be remembered for the things I didn't do or did wrong, so ones in the future will learn from my mistakes to become better people. Your children are the ones in the future that Mark wanted to reach. He would like that. Thank you for listening to me.
I talk to the social workers a lot here about stuff like this, because we do hear about kids that are doing this already in 7th, 8th grade. We always say, don't dance around the truth. The kids are not stupid. They want the truth. They know when you're lying to them. They know when you're fabricating things. So tell them what's real. But like he's saying, tell them, even if you did drink in the past or when you were younger, maybe you saw something. Like I tell them all the time, like they ask me, Miss Levin, did you drink when you were a kid? I tell them, I'm not going to lie to you guys and say I've never had a drink when I was under 21. But at the same time, I also watched some of my friends get arrested, and it was never something that I felt was something that I needed to be doing. It wasn't something that I did often at all. And some people make mistakes like that, and you don't have to live every experience. You don't want to live an experience of getting into a car crash. You don't have to live an experience of getting drunk. And like they're saying, that is what the kids are doing. They're not drinking a glass of wine with dinner. They're drinking to get wasted, to have a good time, to socialize, to fit in. And they don't realize that the damage that they're doing to themselves and how sick they're going to get. So I 100% agree with what they're saying, that if you're educating your kids and kind of just giving them the facts, and I remember even as a kid, every time I would walk out of the house, my dad would say to me, don't drink. Or if you do, do not get behind the car. Do not get into a car. Every single time. He still does it to me. I'm 26 years old. Jesse, do not drink. Jesse, do not get. I'm like, Dad, thank you. I'm a health teacher. I understand it. Thank you. But I think little things like that where, you know, if your kids can respect you and like they were saying, like don't be their friend necessarily, but just be somebody that, you know, they can get along with, but also, you know, that has a little bit of control and that they understand if they're drinking, they're going to have consequences not just medically, but also with you guys or possibly with the law.
The last thing I was just going to really quickly add in, you guys were asking, like, what do we say to our kids? And I was just thinking, a lot of it is, like, they, no matter what, will be put into a situation like this eventually where they're going to have to make that decision. So I would definitely say giving them tips on how to get out of that situation in a cool way, like, still like, showing face, like, being a cool kid, but, like, getting out of that situation so that they're not drinking, and always being available and telling them, like, you can call me if you need a ride. I think that the kids, when I ask them, how many of you would call a parent, or would you get into the car with the drunk driver? They're like, I would get into the car with the drunk driver. I'm like, no, call your parents. They will not get you, you know, maybe you'll get into a little bit of trouble. It is not worth getting into a car. So make sure that they know that you're available. And also, I'm going to be, for the 8th grade parents, I'm going to be having kids from the Recovery Center who have been addicted to drugs and alcohol coming in at the end of May, so look out for that too. Have a good day.